want to look at sort of the three basic freedoms. So when I interviewed the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, there's a question as to whether Hezbollah has the ingredients of a state. So has it actually become a state? And this is something that is mentioned in the US Embassy cables, that Hezbollah has developed its own fiber optic network in South Lebanon. So it has the three primary ingredients of a state. It has control over armed force within a particular region. It has a communications infrastructure that it has control over, and it has a financial infrastructure that it has control over. And we can also think about this as some kind of three basic liberties. The liberty of freedom of movement, physical freedom of movement, your ability to travel from one place to another, to not have armed force deployed against you. We can think about the liberty of freedom of thought, freedom of communication, which is inherently wrapped up in freedom of thought. And finally, the liberty of freedom of economic interaction.
Yeah, but why would you need only three fundamental freedoms? I mean, in my European Charter for Fundamental Rights, there are more.
Because I think many of these are derivative. So from the freedom of communication, you can every other freedom becomes known.
That's the freedom to read and the freedom to write, for example. So that's the freedom to speak and the freedom to be able to read and the right to read any book.
And it's the freedom of thought, because this communication is meaningless unless there's freedom of thought.
But privacy would be contained in freedom of thought, because freedom of thought means it doesn't get out of your mind.
Privacy becomes important either from a communitarian perspective, which is you need privacy in order to communicate freely and to think freely, or you need it for your economic interaction in some way. So I think these are more derivative freedoms, and these first three that I listed are the fundamental freedoms from which other freedoms derive.
Well, there is a legal definition to fundamental freedom.
Yeah, but this is I've read the EU Charter. I can tell you, it's an absolute dog's breakfast of consensus.
Okay, and the lobbies managed to put
intellectual property
crazy
things
in the EU Charter.
Architecture, I mean, one of the fundamental things that Cypherpunks recognize is that the architecture actually defines the political situation. So if you have a centralized architecture, even if the best people in the world are in control of it, it attracts assholes. Yeah. And those assholes do things with that power that the original designers would not do. Yeah. And no matter where we look, we can see, especially with financial systems, that effectively, even if the people have the best of intentions, it doesn't matter. I mean, the architecture is the truth. It's true for the internet with regard to communications. The so-called lawful intercept systems, which is just a nice way of saying spying on people, right? That stuff was built, I think.
That's a euphemism, lawful interception.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like lawful murder. You've heard about that. The drone strikes on American citizens by the U.S. President Obama. You know, when he killed Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son in Yemen, that's lawful murder, right? Or targeted killing, as they put it, right? So so-called lawful intercept is the same thing. You just put lawful in front of everything, and then all of a sudden, because the state does it, it's legitimate. But it's, in fact, the architecture of the state that allows them to do that at all. And it is the architecture of the laws and the architecture of the technology just as the same as it's the architecture of financial systems.